All right, at this time, we have a couple.
Now we got it. Good evening. At this time, we have a public hearing regarding the proposed use of municipal aid program funds and local government economic assistance for the year 2024-2025. Council, you should have received that on your packet. That's what this is. And this is open now for any public comments at this time on this issue.
It's unclear exactly what the issue is.
All right, the issue is as follows. The local government is using the road fund to actually do some paving. The two streets involved is Blossom Park Drive, connector road to Planet Drive, and also Seminole Trail, North Mohegan Trail to Arapahoe Trail. If no further comments on this, I will close this hearing, public hearing. At this time, would everyone please stand? We will call this meeting to order. At this time, we have a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll have Mr. Greg Hampton to lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, we're calling the meeting, the City Council for Monday, September the 23rd, 2025 to order. A reminder that this meeting is conducting business for the City of Georgetown. Please remind you of decorum that is expected of you at all times. At this time, following the agenda, we will have to call the meeting to order. At this time, roll call.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
Mrs. Wilkins-Brent?
Here.
Mrs. Butcher-Conway?
Here.
Mrs. Hambrick?
Present.
Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. Showalter? Mr. Stone?
Here.
Mrs. Tackett?
Here.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have a motion for approval of the minutes.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Ms. Tackett. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second made by Ms. Brent. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say likewise. Let the record reflect that the minutes for the last meeting was approved. Next, the check receipt registered. You should have received in your packet. If you have received those, please show by raising your hand. Let the record reflect that all received the check registry. At this time, public comments. A reminder, this is public comments. You have 4 minutes to state your concern or to this council. The Madam Clerk will time you. When you get close to a minute, she will alert you, and we'll ask that you can finish up at that point in time. And then at the end of 4 minutes, she will tell you again. We'll ask that you kindly take your seat at that time. At this time, we have Ms. Hsu on the regional development.
Good evening, Erin Hsu, 108 Arrowhead Court, pleasantly persistent nuisance. Over many visits to this council, I've presented points in opposition to the regional plan based on traffic and safety and the environment and the history and the cultural impacts of why this is a bad idea. I've also pointed out that we now have over 800 people opposed to this project in our social media group. We're showing up. We're coming to the meetings, we're writing the letters, we're talking to the councils and the interest groups, we're doing all the things. And yet this keeps on marching forward. So I guess if those points aren't making an impact, then to make anybody take a pause and really look at it, instead let's do some math from the interlocal draft agreement, which we'll be discussing tomorrow as well. On Exhibit B1, someday when it's ready, we'll get 10% of the revenue off the top, and then the oddly specific 16.67% of the remainder. So 16.67% of 90 is 15.003, so we'll be keeping that plus the top 10, so around 25%. But of that 10 off the top, how much comes back to the city budget and how much goes to the county? Is it 50-50? In which case, the city will see 5% of the total and it's 16.6% of revenue, so the city gets 21.67 of the eventual. By 2040, which is in 16 years, maybe. Since it's within the urban service boundary, who's providing the services and the infrastructure for this thing? In the July 8th Q&A document that was shared, it says the estimated cost of the infrastructure will be $28 million. So $9.375 to buy the land, $28 million to buy the stuff that it needs to be viable. We're $37 million in and counting for 21% of the revenue eventually by 2040. We keep pointing to lanes run as the model. Per the September 9th Q&A document, the 2023 reported lanes run occupational license tax was $1,091,889. In 2024, it was around $1.8 million, 9,797-ish, with some bits and pieces still coming in. Let's be generous and round that up and say $2 million. The city's share would be $420,000 for the year. City and county combined would be 10% off the top, plus the 33, which is 29.7 total. So if it's $2 million in revenue, it's $594,000. At that rate, it'll take 62 years to break even on $37 million. And that's once it's built. So add 14 years and it's 76 years. In the meantime, where's that $28 million coming from? Some of it will be state funding, that's true, but where does the state funding come from? It comes from taxpayers. I'm still paying for this thing, and I don't want it. The fact that not only 800 of us are being clear that we don't want the development, we certainly don't want it in the location that's being presented, and we're also the ones paying for it, it kind of feels like adding insult to injury. $37 million. We don't get to vote on this, but 800 people care enough about it that they're following us for updates, and they're wanting to be kept informed about it. And if 800 people care that much, maybe 800 votes will make a difference in a few weeks. This is what I can figure out from the numbers that have been provided. I sure hope that some of that's wrong, that there are other elements that aren't being taken into consideration there, but this is the level of detail that we're asking for to understand what our investment is truly paying for. As the taxpayers of the city, county, and state, we're the ones who are paying for it. I'll see you all tomorrow for the working session. I really hope that we're going to get answers to these kind of questions with this level of detail. And thank you, as always, for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dan Holman, alternatives.
Hi there, I'm Dan Holman in Georgetown. Yeah, so I think at this point, this thing has been going on for a year, and so it's kind of time. I guess after tomorrow, you all will basically have all the information you need. I think we've all really had the information we need for a long time now, but so it's kind of time to just start, making a decision and making your statement one way or another. This is a really bad idea for the city of Georgetown. For a lot of reasons. I think we just all know all the either you think it's a good idea or you think it's a bad idea. So I mean, just creating a special purpose government entity. Adam Eland called those. They did an audit of that 10 years ago. He called them ghost entities. I think was the assessment. They exist and they just do their thing, and it's hard to have oversight. And they have made some legislative changes, but they're ghost entities. We would have 2 board members on this entity, and so like once every 4 or 5 years, the council would get to appoint 1 board member, and the fiscal court would get to appoint another one, and then there would be 6 total board members. This city would get 1 member and there would be 5 who came from other places. So, if you think that's a good idea, and some people, don't care, some people have this regional perspective that just let's support business in the whole region, and we don't really care about Georgetown being different than Madison County, being different from Lexington. Not to mention all the other counties that did not want to join in this. This is not like an actual regional authority that controls everything. It's just one more authority out there of many, one more entity competing with the other entities. It doesn't even solve the competition problem that everybody keep saying. The location is horrible. For the love of God, please, just to get your attention, for the love of God, can somebody call Jack Whitaker over on Lexus Way with all this massive amounts of land that nobody's talked to the guy? I don't know. Barney Jenkins said he'd never talked to him. Call Jack Whitaker formally. Could this council reach out to him formally? And that's where our next business park should be. And then this should probably be a regional recreational park. And so there needs to be an alternatives committee formed. We've looked for a year at this business park thing very secretly. And so one question is the transparency. This council, you all have more power than you know. You all have more power than you know. And people play off of that you don't know what your power is. So we need to all wake up. And there is an election. The only hope for this thing, this would go through if there wasn't an election in November, in a few weeks from now. If you vote for this, no offense, you need to go. And pretty much everybody running non-incumbents, the majority of them are skeptical of this and do not want it. Okay, so this KPDI thing, we did our job. The state gives every county $2 million to go find land. We got our $1.5 million for Lanes Run Phase 3. Madison County could not find in their county that's 1.5 times the size and 1.5 times the population of ours. They failed. They could not do their part of this regional project. They could not find and get an option on $2 million of land. Lexington failed to do their part of this state regional initiative. They got $200,000 apparently of some small project, but they failed to get the matching, to get an option on a property and get matching funds. We're the only one that succeeded. We've done our part for the regional initiative for this year with Lanes Run, and they didn't. So the real question is, do you really want, would you all even want a share in Madison, in a business park in Madison County? Why would we want to own a part of the tax base of Madison County? Some people would. I don't know why we would. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. At this time, following the agenda, we have the, at this time, we will have the events application. A, we have Georgetown College procession, excuse me.
Good evening. Georgetown College has submitted an application for this council for the purpose of closing Memorial Drive on Friday, October the 11th, for the purpose of hosting a processional which honors the donors who took part in the college's debt remediation project. This will be for late afternoon. Basically, all we are requesting is barricades placed and the Memorial Drive closed for the purpose of the rededication of Memorial Drive to Robert N. Wilson Way. We are anticipating a significant amount of participation, both not only from the donors, faculty, students, staff, and our Board of Trustees will be present as well. And this is coming at the very beginning of our homecoming weekend, so this is a precursor to those events as well.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Stone. Do I have a second? Second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and or comments? All of those who are in favor of Georgetown College processional signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Thank you very much. Next is the fire prevention parade. Chief Johnson.
Good evening. No, ma'am, I won't be driving.
You don't want me to drive?
I don't get to drive anymore. We're requesting a road closure as well this evening. I'm requesting that the road be closed from Military and Main Street from 7 p.m. to around about 7:30 p.m. And prior to that, we'll have line up on Military Street from Military to Military and Jackson, starting at 6 p.m. We would hope to see you all there to participate in the lineup. I've already put in an application for road encroachment with the State Road Department as well, so that's underway. I put that in September the 5th, so I'm anticipating some response back from them sometime this week. That's all I've got for you this evening, sir.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Ms. Brandt. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second made by Ms. Conway. Are there further questions and or comments?
Yeah, in terms of traffic control, can you?
Traffic control will be handled by PD. That's our request to you all. Is that okay? Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion, the fire prevention parade on October the 17th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, so, and this means that Ms. Conway's not driving, so, okay, so
Oh,
we can move
shucks.
on.
I don't understand.
All right, let's move on. C, domestic violence vigil. Someone here for that?
Hi, good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of Elizabeth Village. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so we have a few different events going on. We are asking to close down Court Street and the Court Square so that we can host a domestic violence vigil in support of survivors and other people who have experienced similar situations. It would be closed from about 6 p.m. to about 8:30 p.m., where we'll have some speakers, some survivors telling their stories.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion-
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Second made by Ms. Tackett. Are there further questions and or comments?
What does the two exits mean? Is that just off of Court Street? Where it talks about if yes indicate required streets, Court Square in front of the City Hall, entrance to Court Square, and the two exits, that's just the two exits coming off of it?
Down the
Yeah.
hill and behind this building.
Okay, good, thank you.
Are there any other questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion for domestic violence ritual, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor comments, following the agenda. First, we have the proclamation for the Manufacturing Month 2024, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Jack Connor to come up and tell us a little bit about this proclamation.
Be more than happy to. Excuse me. Also with me is Dave Rogers. Dave is over here to my right. You're in front of you. He is the co-chair of the Scott County Industrial Forum. And what we're asking for today is to continue our Manufacturing Month tradition, which we started last year. So October is Manufacturing Month, specifically in the state of Kentucky, also throughout the country, but yet Kentucky Association of Manufacturers celebrates it, and we do likewise. The mission is really simple, is to demonstrate to the community and others the value of manufacturing has both just to our community and to our workforce. You have some pamphlets in front of you. We're going to be doing a number of things as we did last year, specifically to celebrate manufacturing. Billboards will be located on South 25 as well as on Cherry Blossom at Paris Pike. You'll see the 3 billboards that we have. The first thing is to thank a manufacturer. It can be just as simple as going up to somebody that you know that works at C&D Products, which is now Qualex, or somebody who works at Commonwealth Tool and Machine, and just thank them for what they do. Why would you thank them? Well, they're jobs. They're good paying jobs. And we've talked about with council about the revenue generation, what we want to continue to do in this community. So one of those billboards tells you how much a manufacturer average wage is. It's about $75,000 per year. It's actually a little bit more. That number, by the way, comes from KY Stats, which all of my stats come from, so it's not something that we're just kind of pushing out of the air. And the last billboard says, and this is really good data, because this is data that I pulled a week ago, 58% of every employee, 58% of every employee in this community is a manufacturer. That can also be somebody in logistics. It can also be somebody who's administration, example at Toyota. But that's the number that the state gives us, and that is why we feel that it's so important to celebrate and recognize manufacturers in this community. And also, one of the things that we're going to be doing, we're doing plant tours of 8 manufacturing companies with 210 students from the high schools to give them a feel that they understand it's not dark, dirty, and dangerous, but it's a good environment that pays well. Again, not suggesting that everybody will be a manufacturer, but recognizing that they are a significant part of our community. So we would ask your permission, your authority to be part of a joint resolution. I'll do this before fiscal court on Thursday night for this Manufacturing Month in October.
Do I have?
Whereas manufacturing is a dynamic and robust industry crucial to the health and strength of Georgetown, Scott County, Texas' diverse economy, and whereas manufacturing-related workers generated over $1.9 billion in gross wages from Georgetown, Scott County jobs in 2023, the largest total payroll among private sector industries, and whereas Georgetown and Scott County manufacturing and related employees account for over 55% of all employment in Scott County. And whereas manufacturers in Georgetown and Scott County pay an average weekly wage of $1,530. And whereas Georgetown and Scott County manufacturing sector continues to diversify and expand, which significantly contributes to the broadening of the economy and offering unlimited potential for growth. And whereas Georgetown and Scott County's high standard of living and economic vitality is due to the strong manufacturing foundation. Now, therefore, let it be known that we, Bernie Jenkins, Mayor of the City of Georgetown, and Joe Pat Covington, Scott County Judge Executive, do hereby recognize October 2024 as Georgetown Scott County Manufacturing Month.
Motion made.
Motion made by Ms. Tackett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second made by Mr. Allen. Are there further questions and or comments?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Jack, did we see after the previous manufacturing months, did we see an uptick in manufacturing? How are we tracking some of the results from this activity?
I track it by clients, and I track it by the interest. I track it by the school system as a good example, which is why I mentioned the 210. Now we're broadening out in terms of our school system. We're out, if you aren't aware, there's now a CAD pathway at Great Crossing High School. So that's how I'm seeing it. I don't do it by metrics. I do look at it in terms of percent of employees, et cetera, things of that nature. But it's,
you said there's 8 plants that will be toured.
We're going to tour 8 plants this time. It's it's through the month of October. 8 plants, yes.
Are there any other questions and or comments? All those in favor of this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Thank you.
Thank you all very,
Okay,
very much.
general update, just a reminder, council, that we'll have a workshop tomorrow at 5:30 at the library. Okay? All right, before I get to the development of fee, I want to give you some updates. With the Derby Estates, with this been something ongoing. Myself, along with a staff member from city government, will meet with Ms. Allison Catron tomorrow at 10 o'clock to hear some concerns they have, because she's been the spokesperson for that group, and we're going to actually just talk to her about some of the issues in Derby Estates and see what we can do to resolve some of those issues. Likewise, the school has also been in, and we're trying to keep updates with the school and also District 7 as to the issue as was brought about the traffic concerns pertaining to the new high school. I want to give you kind of an update on that. There will be a caution yellow flashing sign installed on Highway 32, Long Lick, and Kentucky 1143, which is on the bypass, at the 2 new Scott County High School entrance. The speed limit will be 45 miles per hour when flashing. The signs have been ordered, and as soon as possible, they will be delivered and the signs will be installed. And as soon as I get information or update on that, I will let this council and everybody know. Another is the demolition of the green building update. It has been demolished. At this time, they're going to be starting back tomorrow, weather permitting. They're going to continue on that till it gets all cleaned up and show it back in. And once again, I'll give you update at that time. Ms. Hambrick has been asked on the revenue, and what we're going to do is I've invited Scott Hall to come and give us an update. As you recall, September the 11th, 2023, Mr. Hall and Jessica came and gave us kind of a presentation as what their methods were and the revenue and some of the issues that were concerned. So coming forward, we're going to ask them to come back, and I'll let you all know what that date will be, and they're going to kind of give you a 15-minute presentation as to where they are now based on some of the procedures and methods they have in place. Okay? You're welcome. All right. Next on the agenda is as follows. We'll have the presentation for the development impact fee. And each of you should have received a packet, and you can follow along as you go. So you tell us who you introduce yourself. I think you came back here earlier in January. And I want the council please to listen up and please adhere to what they're telling us and ask questions. Ask questions if you are concerned about something or you don't understand something. Let's make sure we ask those questions. Okay?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Ben Griffin with Tischler Weiss. As the mayor said, back in January, we kicked off this process, and we've been working with staff ever since. So tonight we want to run through what we have proposed, but also answer a lot of questions because when a community considers adoption of impact fees, there are generally a lot of questions. And I want to start by saying impact fees can't solve all of your problems. It is one mechanism for financing growth-related infrastructure, but it definitely cannot solve everything. But, what we'll go through tonight is sort of an overview of, basically Impact Fee 101, so bring everyone up to speed. We'll look at sort of our timeline, what we have going forward, the land use assumptions, so essentially the development projections. And then we'll look at each of the development impact fee components, and then we'll take a look at, what that looks like when we put all of those fees together. All right. So impact fees are one-time payments for future development's share of growth-related infrastructure. So that's something, really important. It's, a capital cost. So we can't use this for operating. We can't use it for maintenance, rehab, repair. This needs to be growth-related, and it needs to be a capital cost. It's not a tax. It is a legally binding contract. So once you take that fee, you are required to provide a benefit to the fee payer in the form of some type of infrastructure. You'll hear me say level of service many times tonight. When looking at impact fees, level of service means what you provide to existing development or what you plan to provide. And so I may be talking about the number of, police cars per person. I may be talking about the number of fire apparatus per person. Basically, it's a way to say this unit of infrastructure divided by some type of development. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, from the beginning, level of service, as defined by impact fees, is some sort of infrastructure divided by some sort of development.
I have a question.
Sure.
So this fee that you're talking about, would it be possibly tinkered with if there ended up being more of an impact than at first glance? When do you pay the fee, and can it be adjusted on the back end if there's more of an impact based on what's happened?
Great question. So most communities will collect the fee at the time of permit, because that's when you still have the teeth to prevent development from happening without paying this.
Right.
Some communities will do certificate of occupancy, but generally you want to assess the fee when you can stop the development process from happening without development paying their fair share of these capital costs. When you say tinkering on the back end, and we'll see this in a couple slides, there are credits that you can provide or you are required to provide if development speeds up, it slows down, basically it's not in line with what we're projecting, or costs change drastically, then it would make sense to go ahead and update and take into consideration those fees.
So that could be negotiated on the back end?
Potentially.
Okay.
It depends on specifically what you're meaning with negotiating, because you want to make sure, when you adopt these fees, it's a way to say, all right, based on this type of development, this is your proportionate cost for development. So there are things you can do after, and you maybe if there's an affordable housing development, or there's a development that's going to bring a lot of jobs. Maybe you waive a portion of the fee, but you do have to make the fund whole. So essentially, you're saying, hey, our general fund is going to make up the difference to the impact fee fund. So yeah, there are things you can do to reduce fees later on, but you do have to make the fee whole.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so there are 3 requirements for impact fees. First, need. Generally, a community that's not growing will not have impact fees. So because you're growing, that's a positive sign to us that you do have the need for that infrastructure. The types of projects that you include with an impact fee are maybe not the type of projects that everyone thinks of. So if you had a road fee, you wouldn't fund the turn lanes into a development with impact fees, but you may fund the widening of a nearby arterial. So you want to make sure that these are system level improvements and not project level, because you want to make sure that the whole community, or at least a portion of the community, receives a benefit from this. Next up is benefit. The first part of benefit is you want to make sure that the fee payer is geographically close enough. I think you have a single service area for everything except for sewer. So generally, as long as you're within the city limits, you're paying the same fee as someone else. So it's deemed that you're receiving a benefit from that. The other part of benefit is you want to make sure that you spend that money within a timely manner. So generally, that's 5 to 10 years. You want to make sure that that money you've collected, you've spent it. And so there's an understanding that some projects, bigger cost projects, maybe you need 10 years of collections before you can fund that. But maybe you spend some of that money to acquire land, and then a couple of years later, you're paying for design. So that way, you're spending that money, in a timely manner. But everyone understands this is and I'm just making up numbers here, a $5 million, construction project. So we need to generate fees over, 5 to 10 years. But we can break that down and, spend that over, an extended period of time. So again, just making sure that you are spending that money within a timely manner. And finally, proportionate to demand. So you'll see in the fees, we have different land uses and they have different fees. That's because different types of land uses have different demands for infrastructure. So generally with residential, you're going to look at the number of persons per housing unit. On the non-residential side, it could be employees per 1,000 square feet, or the number of vehicle trips generated per 1,000 square feet of different types of development. But that's just a way to make sure that we're tying the demand for this infrastructure to the actual demand that type of development generates. Because we don't want to get into a situation where you adopt impact fees and then you're sued. That's not what any of us wants. We want to make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So that's why we've picked some a few sort of generic land uses. And if something comes up later, if you adopt and you say it doesn't fit easily into one of these, you just give us a call. It usually takes us maybe 30 minutes, and that use that doesn't fit neatly into one of these handful of land uses, we can do a fee calculation for you and say, okay, well, based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the trip generation rates for this, or the employment density for this is this. So based on what the study says is the cost per person, or the cost per vehicle trip, this is what that sort of isolated use should actually pay. So that's, just because you see these land uses in the presentation and eventually the report, doesn't mean those are the only land uses. It's just in general, from, an accounting or an administrative perspective, it's easier to show like a general office and a general commercial and a general industrial. But if you have certain land uses that don't fit neatly into that, you can always give us a call, and it doesn't take us, very long to come up and say, hey, this is what that different land use should pay. All right?
I have a question.
Sure.
But at any given time, in any property or land that we're looking at, these three criteria has to be the three criteria in order to make it work, right?
That is correct.
And if you have a developer that comes in and wants to develop a piece of property, I'm sure that he already works out something with planning and zoning and water and city and fire, police, all of that. So this impact fee, one-time fee, has to be used for infrastructure or something within that development, correct? And it's a one-time fee, right?
It's a one-time fee.
For that one developer, depending on how many homes he puts in a subdivision.
Correct.
Versus 2.3 people or whatever, and that you're going to calculate that and have that one-time fee. How long do you have before you can spend that money or should spend that money? And can that money be put somewhere to draw interest if it's sitting?
So I'm hearing three questions. The
Okay.
first is, how soon can you spend it? Immediately. How long do you have to spend it? Generally, 5 to 10 years. Your ordinance will define how long that's going to be. Some states are very specific, and they say you have, 6 years in Arkansas, you have 10 years in Arizona. So your ordinance will handle that. That way, it's not, ambiguous. And then the final question was,
I don't know if
Can
this
you-
was the one you were, well, okay, so there are 4 questions, yeah.
Well,
About-
the other one was, if we put the money, set it aside, can it be interest-bearing? And does that just go back into that impact fee fund to be utilized?
it
Would that be
does,
the way
and
to-
your impact fees have to be separate from any other funds.
Okay.
You can't commingle those.
The comment was made, though, I think, in this example, it has to be used for that development. That can be, the fee can be used for future developments outside of this particular development, can it?
It is to fund that development's proportionate share of.
Infrastructure.
Correct. And so, once we get into the actual fees, you'll see that we're proposing, fire stations, police stations. So it's that development's share of a future facility, or that development's share of an existing facility to buy into
Right,
some
but
excess
it's not
capacity.
necessarily in that development.
Correct. It's in the community.
Right, okay.
Interesting.
All right, any other questions before we move on?
All right, are you going to talk about the process in terms of how the assessment is done? Okay.
Oh, yes. And we can go into a lot of detail or not a lot. There is a lot of detail to this. So we do have a lot of slides at the end in case you have very specific questions. So this could go on for a long time for discussion. So we moved them to the end just in case you have questions, but I'll talk in, general terms for the most part, give you a summary, and then if you have a specific question, we can jump to that slide.
And real quick, who does the assessment?
So are you talking about the collection of the actual impact fee?
No, the assessment to determine what the fee would be for this particular.
So I did that and, discussed it with staff to get local costs, local square footage, vehicle counts.
So for a development, for somebody that's bringing in a new development, who would do the assessment for that particular?
So there's a fee schedule, and most likely it would be whoever handles permitting. And so that permit, if it says, 100 housing units, then it's 100 housing units based on square footage times whatever the fee would be.
All right.
And I think you said earlier, it's based on growth and some other external factors? Did I hear that?
So you need to have growth to have impact fees because they're
Right.
growth-related costs. But we also look at demand. If you don't need certain types of infrastructure, then we won't include those. And we have discussions with staff to say, hey, before you even bring it to you, this is what we're showing. Does this make sense?
And that's kind of where we came back and amended the contract on the roadway infrastructure portion, because ultimately the way that we require developments to occur, we're already putting that burden on the developer. So it doesn't make sense, that fee wouldn't, it wouldn't make sense to assess that. You couldn't, since we already require that. So we thought, let's pare it down and have municipal facilities, police, fire, water, wastewater. But to that point, yeah, I mean, if that kind of plays into your question.
It does.
Right, if you have a funding mechanism that works for you, why have the change to an impact fee? And that's really what we're trying to figure out here. So we have these, funding gaps in certain, types of infrastructure. So that's really what we want the impact fees to fund.
And I think my question was, if we're growing at 2.2%, that is factored in, it sounds like. But down the road, we might be only growing at 1%. So there's an adjustment based on the external factors as well, sounds like.
Potentially, and it depends on the fee methodology, which I think is the next slide.
I'll be quiet.
And so, generally, there are three methodologies. They look at points in time. So cost recovery looks to the past and says, hey, we've got excess infrastructure capacity, so we want to have future development buy into this excess capacity. Incremental expansion looks at the present and says, this is our existing level of service, this is what we provide today. This is what it would cost us to, acquire another, patrol vehicle. This is what it would cost us to construct a fire station, per square foot. And so we can maintain the existing level of service, for 10 years. Or there's a plan-based, which looks to the future and says, hey, we want to build, X, Y, and Z infrastructure. And, does that increase our level of service? If the answer is yes, then we have to identify an outside funding source to fund existing development's share of that, because you can't charge future development a higher level of service than existing development receives unless you have an outside funding source to raise that level of service, and then you're charging everyone the same. And so to answer the question related to, hey, we're growing around 2.2% now, what if growth slows? With the incremental methodology, you could grow by 10,000 people a year, or you could grow by 5 people a year. The impact fee would not change based on that, but the revenues collected would change. So it's based on maintaining an existing level of service. So if if the economy stalls and you're not generating as much fee revenue, you're not building as much. So it insulates the general fund from having to make up that difference. And a lot of communities in the past would use a cost recovery or a plan-based methodology, and then the Great Recession hit, and a lot of communities that had impact fees were forced to either refund because they couldn't afford to build that infrastructure because they had started to collect, but they couldn't come up with money to make up that gap, or they would have to find money somewhere. So maybe they're issuing debt, or maybe they're taking money from another department to fund that. So a lot of communities shifted to an incremental methodology because it maintains your existing level of service. The one downfall of that is if you have a deficient level of service, then you are maintaining a deficient level of service. So you can't fix your deficiency with impact fees. You're always going to have an outside revenue source to fix that deficiency. But the incremental methodology does provide a lot of flexibility, and it doesn't say you're going to build this specific project. It says you need this many units of infrastructure. And it doesn't say it's going to be at this location. It just says you need maybe this many square feet of fire facilities. So that could be an expansion to an existing facility. It could be a new facility, but it doesn't tie you to anything specific. So most of the proposed fees use the incremental methodology, especially with a community considering impact fees for the first time. A lot of communities like that flexibility because something may come up that they had not anticipated. Mm-hmm. Growth may start to happen on one side of town where you were projecting it on another. And so again, it just provides that flexibility where you can adjust to that different development cycle. So any questions related to methodologies? Okay, so next up we have credits. So there are basically two types of credits. There's a site-specific, which is handled after you've enacted impact fees. So if a developer constructs something that you've included in the impact fees, so maybe they build your fire station, or maybe they build your police station, or maybe they put in some of your water or sewer infrastructure, they would receive a credit against their impact fees. So that's handled on the back end. Basically it's just a credit against what they would pay in impact fees for the infrastructure costs that they have funded. The other type is handled in the impact fee study. So that's going to include, debt service or any sort of dedicated revenue. And so we include that because we want to make sure that, future development is paying once through the impact fee and then once through that future revenue source. So if you've, issued debt for a specific improvement, we want to make sure that, they're not paying that impact fee and then making those future debt service payments. So we would just include a credit against the impact fee for those future debt service payments. So it essentially just lowers the impact fee proportionately so they're not charged twice. All right. All right, so project timeline. So as I mentioned earlier, we started this in January, and we've spent the last several months, working very closely with staff, making sure that the development projections are in line with, what you can expect, and then making sure that, the inventories for our existing level of service, the costs, that all those match what you anticipate in Georgetown. So tonight, first public presentation. We anticipate in October to have some stakeholder outreach. Generally, when a community is looking at impact fees the first time, there are a lot of questions. So that's something that we think October, have that stakeholder outreach, answer any questions, listen to stakeholders, so we can make any adjustments if needed before coming back for a future, second presentation, first reading of the ordinance, and then the rest, that second reading and the actual effective date of the development impact fees. Those are to be determined based on what we hear from you tonight, what the stakeholders have to say, and then following an adoption timeline that that works for everyone. All right. All right, so we talked about the fees have to be proportionate to demand. So what you see at the top, these are some residential occupancy factors. These are all for Georgetown. The top is recent census data. So if we just look at single family versus multifamily occupancy in Georgetown, you can see that the average single family home is about 2.57 persons per housing unit. A multifamily unit, is a little over 1.8. So a lot of communities will assess impact fees to residential development based on just a general land use, a single family versus multifamily. And that is fine. That works for a lot of communities. Early in the discussions in Georgetown, housing affordability came up, and there is a way to assess fees more proportionately to demand than just looking at single family versus multifamily. So we can actually take that same census data and we can look at the number of bedrooms, the number of square feet, and then we can come up with an average occupancy by a square footage threshold. And so what you can see at the bottom is for a 1,000 square foot unit or less, you're just over one person per housing unit. And then for those units over 3,000 square feet, you're looking at about 3.2 persons per housing unit. And so if you assess fees by size of unit, you can see that those smaller units, they have fewer occupants, there's less demand for infrastructure, so they would pay proportionately less than those larger units. So this is a way to make those smaller units more affordable. And so if housing affordability is a concern, this is one way to address that. Also, this prevents the smaller units from subsidizing the larger units. So if you just did fees by type of unit, so a 1,000 square foot single family unit would pay the same fee as a 5,000 square foot single family unit. So that small unit is subsidizing that larger unit. So by moving to a size of unit, it prevents the smaller units from subsidizing the larger units. And it has a tighter nexus to the actual demand from those different types of infrastructure. So any questions on residential occupancy before we move on? Okay.
Yeah. I got a question. So houses, based on this one on the bottom, and more than likely, the developer's gonna use this as a pass-through. So if we're looking at affordable housing, and we're assessing, I'm just talking out loud, I think, and we're doing the assessment of these fees for the smaller houses, if this is used as a pass-through, it's not helping our affordable housing situation. Do we have the flexibility to say houses under this size will not be assessed a fee?
You can definitely do that, but you do have to make the impact fee fund whole.
Yes.
That's the issue. So, if the fees were $1,000 per person, at least with, the smallest units, you'd be paying about $1,000 per housing unit compared to the largest units paying, about $3,200.
Okay.
So, if those were both single-family units, then, it's cheaper for those larger units if you would just assess the fees by housing unit type. So it does shift, some of the cost away from those smaller units. But yes, you are correct. It is a pass-through. The developer will pass those costs along to the homeowner. All right. Any other questions related to the occupancy rates? Okay. So we take those single-family versus multifamily occupancy rates, and we use them in these residential projections. So we're projecting population based on 2% annual population growth, and then we convert that to housing units using those persons per housing unit. Based on discussions with planning staff, it's projected that the shift in housing units moves away from single family being the overwhelming majority, and looks at about a 60-40 split, single family versus multifamily. And so then we just apply those occupancy rates to that, those 2,200 single family units projected over 10 years and about 1,500 multifamily units. And so what we're saying here is if you grow by about 3,700 units, and they are that housing unit mix, then we're looking at population growth of about 8,500 people in those new housing units. And so the impact fees are, assessed, per person. So really what we're doing is just saying, hey, that population increase, we're gonna capture the growth-related cost through the impact fee per housing unit. And so, this is the basis of the impact fees. We're saying, hey, if this is, if we think we're about, and I should have made this font slightly larger. We're about 39,000 people and almost 17,000 housing units. That's our base. And those numbers provided by, planning staff. So we're very confident in those numbers. But depending on methodology, that 10-year projection is less important with the incremental methodology. It's more important with the plan based or the cost recovery, where you're saying we're allocating a certain amount of cost to a certain amount of development, which is why most of your fees, we are using that incremental methodology to insulate the general fund from any sort of changes in the development cycle. So any questions about the residential projections before we move on to non-residential? Okay. All right, so for non-residential, I alluded to this earlier. This is data provided by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Basically, it gives you, per 1,000 square feet of floor area for different land uses, how many vehicle trips you can expect, and how many employees you can expect. And so that square feet per employee number, that's important for our projections. The vehicle trips generated, that's important for the fees. And so we take that outlined red column to the right, and you can see those 4 gray rows. Those are our 4 proxy development types that we're using to project non-residential development. So we take those in this next slide, and we can look at how you have grown from 2020 through 2023. And so on average, You've grown by about 157,000 square feet of industrial development, about 60,000 square feet per year of commercial, about 26,000 square feet of office, and about 3,700 square feet of institutional. And so the idea here is that you've been growing this way for a few years, and it seems likely that you will continue to grow. So we use that average annual to project out over the next 10 years. And then we convert that additional floor area into employment. So what's important here is we're saying, if you grow as projected, that's about 2.5 million square feet of non-residential floor area that's new. And then you can expect about 4,700 new jobs in that floor area. So on the non-residential side, we're tying, either employment or that square footage to the actual demand factors. So any questions with non-residential projections?
The ITE code of 770 for business park, I'm curious, why wasn't that one considered? Since that incorporates Lanes Run Business Park and more of our local, I think, business parks. So I don't know if it's, curious why that one wasn't considered or factored in.
So it may have been based on, so when you look at the Institute of Transportation Engineers, each of those proxy land uses, it has a definition. And so it may have been that one of the other land uses better represented the types of development that you're likely to see. But we could always add a business park land use to the fee schedule. It's, now that we've calculated all the fees, it's very easy to, add additional land uses to that fee schedule. So, if you decide that you'd really like a business park land use on there, we can definitely do that. And, we can, I can show you what that fee would be before you decide, hey, we definitely want that. But yeah, if there's a land use that you think you're going to see a lot of over the next 5 to 10 years that's not on the fee schedule, we can definitely discuss adding those additional land uses.
And correspondingly, could you exempt in order to be able to help low-cost housing and those kinds of things? Could you somehow give credits or, like you were talking, and exempt? I know we could build smaller units and the impact fee would be correspondingly smaller, but I would hate for this to make, as a pass-through, housing even more expensive than it already is.
So you can waive a fee, but you do have to make the fund whole.
Yeah, and that's the part that is kind of hard to wrestle with, is the cost, regardless of the affordability or not of the unit. So that cost is already defined, and all of those fees are calculated based on the ultimate cost associated with that growth. So the decision would then be, if this is an affordable housing development and the council has built that in through the ordinance to, if it qualifies, essentially, general fund covers the impact fee to say, hey, this 1/50th of a fire station, one police car, whatever all the factors are, we're going to eat that, and we're going to, through the general fund, make the development impact fee fund whole to incentivize affordable housing development or incentivize something else. You absolutely can do that, but the cost,
city would have to do
the
it.
cost of the growth isn't, it's not going to change. It's set based on the calculation.
How does it impact when the city and county develop Lanes Run Business Park and we're the ones that's putting the money in it? Are we charged impact fees as well?
So that would be handled through your ordinance. Generally, state and federal governments don't pay impact fees because they can bypass the permitting process. But you could say, hey, we as a city are going to pay impact fees because, if we develop something, there is an impact. There is a cost of infrastructure. So that's, something you would have to decide as a community and handle through your ordinance.
Thank you.
All right. All right, and this is just a summary of, the last few slides. So what we're saying is based on, recent development trends, we think you'd see about 3,700 housing units in about 2.5 million square feet of non-residential floor area. And that's what we're tying the fee to, because they're coming in to build the housing units or the non-residential floor area. So the revenue projections that you'll see on several of these slides are basically just saying, hey, this is the impact fee times however many housing units or however many square feet of floor area we're projecting. All right. All right, so we'll start with fire. We're proposing a citywide service area. We're looking at 3 components, all using an incremental methodology, so maintaining that existing level of service. And so based on the existing level of service, what it's likely to cost to construct or purchase these types of infrastructure, and 10 years projected growth, we think over the next 10 years, future development would demand almost 4,300 square feet of fire facilities at a cost of about $4.1 million. This doesn't say it's going to be at this location or this other location. It just says you build additional fire infrastructure. So like I said earlier, that could be an expansion, so adding a bay to an existing facility or building a completely new facility. It just says future development to maintain your level of service demands 4,300 square feet. And where you build that, is up to you. Also, you need about 70% of an apparatus. So essentially what that means is, your future development it's funding part of it. And so a lot of communities, they'll say, hey, you know what, we know we're deficient on this. So maybe, in the next 5 years, you issue debt, you buy another apparatus or 2, you get to a level of service that you think is acceptable, and then we switch methodology in your next update, and now it's a cost recovery. So you have future development paying to retire debt related to that. So just because we use a methodology today doesn't mean that in your next update that you have to stick with that. A lot of times, a lot happens in 5 years. And so the funding mechanism may change, and so we can change methodologies, in each and every study. And within, fire, we could have done an incremental cost recovery and a plan-based for each component. But for this, it worked best, to use an incremental methodology. But again, we can change methodologies for each component or with each update. And so this is just a 10-year summary. We can go into more detail. We have the slides, but again, just to maintain the level of service, this is the growth-related cost of 10 years of development. And then on the next slide, the left side shows the proposed fees. The right side shows projected revenue. And so I'll start with the projected revenue. You can see at the bottom right, the fee revenue is just over $5 million, and then the expenditures also just over $5 million. Because this is an incremental methodology, they should be almost identical. Essentially, the difference is due to rounding. But yeah, the incremental, if you grow faster, you generate more fee revenue, you build more. If you grow slower, less fee revenue, build less. Now, for the actual proposed fees, on the left side, this is the proposed fee schedule. So at the top, you see the cost per person or the cost per vehicle trip for each type of infrastructure. So for residential, it's just shy of $500 per person. For non-residential, it's almost $80 per vehicle trip. We apply that cost per person to the occupancy rates on those residential size thresholds. So 1.05 persons per housing unit on the smallest unit, 3.23 on the largest unit. times that cost per person. So you can see that, on the proposed residential fees, they range from about $500 for the smallest unit to, over $1,000 for the largest unit. For non-residential, you get cost per vehicle trip, you multiply it by the number of vehicle trips per 1,000 square feet. So that proposed fee is the fee per 1,000 square feet. So, if it's a 10,000 square foot facility, then they're going to pay 10 times as much. The only one that doesn't follow that is lodging. Those fees are assessed per room. So this is saying, and again, I should have made the font larger so I could see it from across the room. But these are the proposed fees for growth-related fire infrastructure. So any questions related to fire?
So if this council or the next council decides to move forward with implementing a developer impact fee, and we use this proposed fee schedule, I'm looking at the residential fee, and I'm just going to take the top number, 1,000 or less. It's $501. So let's just say I'm a developer. I come in and I want to develop 100, we'll just use simple terms. I'm going to develop a subdivision with 100 homes that's 1,000 square feet or less. Does that developer pay that all up front before they even, when they get everything okayed through planning and zoning? Or do they pay the impact fee as they build each house and sell each house?
That'll be handled through your ordinance, but generally, it's at the time of the building permit that they would pay that.
So if you're building 100 homes, just as an example, times $501, and I apologize. So it's 50, the developer's going to have to pay $50,100 if we're using the 100 homes as an example.
That's correct.
For fire.
For fire.
For fire.
Yeah.
Not the others.
For fire.
That.
And honestly, I don't know of any developers right now that are building 1,000 square feet or less. Obviously,
Generally, that's going to be your multifamily. So your single family is generally going to be above 1,500 square feet.
But this is upon the issuance of a building permit, right? So it wouldn't be, they're not going to get building permits all at once. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's my thought process too.
but didn't you just say you would pay that up front?
When you
would you
pull the
pay it-
permit.
I'm sorry?
When you pull the permit,
Yes, for
you would
each unit.
likely, that's likely when you would pay the fee.
So we're only talking about fire right now of
Oh, yeah.
$501.
Yeah.
So we haven't approached police, EMS, or anything like that.
Correct.
And what,
Water and wastewater.
water and wastewater and all of that, for one permit.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. I'm following. All right.
All right, so any other questions about fire before we move on to municipal facilities? Okay, so this has one component. It's essentially the City Hall expansion. And the way this is structured, we can actually go to the next slide, because I did give more detail on this. If it was, $12.5 million for this expansion, it's 16,500 square feet. We can spread that cost over all development 10 years out. That way we're treating everyone the same. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that $12.5 million, well, we can only justify growth paying about $2.5 million of that. That is their proportionate share, because existing development receives a benefit from this city hall expansion. And so to make sure that we treat everyone the same, we don't overcharge future development, we're assessing this to all development in 2034, so the final year of our 10-year projection. So you're getting $2.5 million of the $12.5 million that is growth related. And then if you decide you want to issue debt to fund this, we probably need to include a credit for that. So we're not paying once through the impact fee and once through that future debt service. But this just shows, hey, if we have an impact fee for this city hall expansion, this is the maximum allowable fee that we can charge. And so on the next slide, with the proposed fee schedule, it ranges from just under $200 for the smallest residential units to over $500 for the largest. But this is the maximum that we can charge. You can always charge less than what we're proposing. Or you can decide, hey, we don't even want to do this component. And within each fee category, if there's a component that you don't like, we can pull it out. You might say, you know what, we've been doing really well getting grants lately. So we think that it's likely that we're going to get grants to fund this type of infrastructure. So we're going to pull that out to reduce the fee. So there are a lot of ways to adjust these fees. All we're showing tonight is the maximum allowable. You can adopt a percentage. You can remove a component. You can say no to fees. Really what we're trying to do tonight is just walk you through the actual impact fee study and try to answer as many questions as possible and say, hey, this, it's up to you now to, give us your feedback, let us know your thoughts.
There's a question. So can you use different methodologies for the different components?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
All right, so any questions about the municipal facilities fees? Okay, so we can move on to police. So police is, it's structured in a very similar fashion to fire. So a citywide service area, we're looking at a facilities component, a vehicles component, and an equipment component, all using the incremental methodology meant to maintain your existing level of service. So based on 10 years of growth, your existing level of service, and the most likely cost for different types of infrastructure, you need about 6,400 square feet of police facilities at a cost of about $3.2 million. You would expand your fleet of police vehicles by about 3.5 units at a cost of about $127,000. And you need about 27 units of equipment at a cost of about $197,000. And the next slide shows the proposed fees on the left side and the revenues and expenditures on the right side. Is there any questions for police? Okay. So we can move on to water. So the utility fees, there's a lot more information with these, so we included more slides. So we'll start with water. So this would be the utility service area. For the service area, we're looking at 3 components. So a plan-based component for water system improvements, and then an incremental methodology for equipment and facilities. And so based on 10 years of demand, we think you generate about $7.3 million for water system improvements. And in maintaining your existing level of service, you need 8 units of equipment, and you need about 3,000 square feet of facilities. So you'll notice this does not include a water source component. We did not include that because costs are uncertain at this point, and we wouldn't want to include a cost that is too high, and then you're in a situation where you have to refund that overage. And then, if you handle this differently, maybe you don't go with this source. We didn't want to include it because there's just so much uncertainty right now. In a year or two, maybe you have a better idea of this and you can revise your water fee. But we felt, for a community that is, trying to start an impact fee program, there was too much uncertainty with the water source component to include in the proposed fees. All right, so there are a lot of numbers on this, but essentially what we're trying to show here is projected average day demand over the next 10 years. So we took your existing or your 2023 water demand, we compared it to your 2023 sewer flows, and your average day demand on the water side was about 77% of the sewer flow. That's mainly due to not having the water demand on some of those industrial users, but you're getting their sewer flow. And so the thought is that that relationship holds going forward. Because your regional facilities plan projects future wastewater flow, we use that projected flow, apply that 77% factor to it. And so we think based on 10 years of projected demand, you'd see an average day increase of about 1.4 million gallons per day on the water side. That's what we're using to define demand for additional water infrastructure. So any questions related to how we're projecting demand before we move on?
If you looked at it for 1 meter for one house, you guys look at the granular aspect of it? What would 1 meter cost on one house? Because I'm trying to go back to what Mark and I think everybody else is kind of looking at from an affordability standpoint.
So we will show
the
per unit cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so next slide. This looks at the water system improvements. We're using a plan-based approach, saying, hey, we're going to build the Southside tank and distribution system. We back out $5 million in other funding, so we're not including that in the impact fee. So we're saying, hey, the net cost to the utility is really what we're trying to solve for. So $7.7 million in eligible costs, about $1.5 million or 1.5 million gallons of capacity added by these projects. And so we can take that 7.7, divide it by capacity, and get a cost per gallon. So we can say, all right, for if you need water infrastructure, this is what it costs per gallon of capacity. And then in a couple slides, you'll see we show different demand factors for different land uses. So we can proportionately adjust that fee based on the demand for water infrastructure by that land use. But at the bottom, what you can see is, if we're saying about 1.4 MGD increase in demand over the next 10 years, then that's going to generate about $7.3 million in revenue. The eligible cost is about 7.7, so it's really year 11 that you would finally pay off this improvement. So any questions about the water system improvements component? Okay. So next slide, equipment and facilities. These are using an incremental methodology. The idea here is that as you continue to grow, you'll need additional water equipment, you'll need additional water facilities, and so this just proposes a fee to expand your fleet of equipment, expand your water facilities. And so the next slide, this takes all those costs per gallon, and then what you see on the right side, this is actually from the water sewer availability application. So the average day gallons by different land uses. So you can see I've outlined 3 in red and given a little bit more detail about those on the left side, so the actual fee calculation. So with your non-utility fees, we're assessing the fees by size threshold. But on the utility side, because this is how we have the demand data, we're changing how you would actually assess it. So when you need a water meter, for residential uses, it's still per dwelling unit, but it's by a type of unit. So you can see, 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartment, and you can see as the number of bedrooms increases on the apartments, demand also increases, so the fee increases proportionately. Then you see single family, duplex, condo, mobile home. Those are all your residential land uses, so they're by dwelling unit. The rest, which are your non-utility uses, could be per room, could be per person, square foot, per acre. But we're, for the sake of tonight's discussion, we're just focusing on single-family unit, an industrial development, and a shopping center. So all we're doing is taking that cost of $6.09 per gallon and multiplying it by the number of gallons for each of those land uses. So for a single-family unit at 400 gallons a day, it's about $2,400 per unit for growth-related water infrastructure. For industrial development, we have a proxy development of 50,000 square feet. The water and sewer availability application says, an industrial use will demand 2,000 gallons per acre. And so we should be charging, just over $12,000 per acre. We need to convert that square footage to acreage. So the assumption here is, a floor area ratio of about 25%. And so that 50,000 square foot industrial development, the proposed maximum allowable fee is about $56,000. For a shopping center, the application shows those are per square foot, so this is a much easier calculation. So $6.09 a gallon, 0.1 gallons per square foot, so that's 61 cents per square foot. And so a 50,000 square foot shopping center would pay just over $30,000 in water-related impact fees. So you can see as demand for water increases, so do those fees. So any questions related to water?
Just a clarification. On the single family, average day gallons of 400, how did you come up with that?
So I would turn that over to utilities to explain that.
What you're seeing here for the demands, as has been said, those come directly from our availability request that all developers have to fill out and submit to us for approval. And our form here for each one of these usages, these types of development, that comes from what we consider is the most widely accepted flow projection methodology. That comes from a means manual, and that, again, that's just what is most widely accepted. It's a manual that you reference in engineering school, for water resources, you reference on the engineering exam, and that's what our application is based on. Therefore, that's what we included and wanted our fee to be based on, so those match up side by side. There are some things when you see the total calculation toward the end of the presentation that our form makes some of these a little bit lopsided. And you'll see those, there's no doubt there. But we just felt like where we talked to other utilities that have done this, where they strictly base their water and wastewater fee on water meter size, we feel like there are some places where the system can be manipulated as saying, well, we want a smaller meter than what we actually need. So we reduce our impact fee, and then you don't have the meter size to actually serve your development, and then they come and they're angry with the utility afterward. So back to the original question, single-family residential, 400 per day, that's probably high compared to what most single-family residential units will use. However, that also includes your peak day demand, 400 gallons per day. So we have to design all of our infrastructure to accommodate not just average day demand, but peak day demand, and that 400 does factor in both average and peak day demand. Does that answer the question?
Okay, it's a little bit clearer, but it's still.
But that's what we base all of our infrastructure on. We have to do that. We can't
Yes.
design infrastructure just based on average day. We have to be able to accommodate a peak day demand. That's on water and the wastewater side.
Thanks, Chase.
Thanks, Chase. And Chase touched on another point. Some communities, they assess fees by water meter size, and if you base your fee on water meter size, you generally have a single-family unit as your base, and if a 3/4 inch or 1 inch residential meter on average doesn't have the same demand as a 3/4 inch or a 1 inch non-residential meter, then you're, from the get-go, you're undercharging your non-residential development. And so a lot of our Arizona communities, they're switching away from meter size for that same reason, because the cost of water infrastructure, the cost of sewer infrastructure is so high that they want to make sure that they are proportionately charging those non-residential developments for that. And so that is, one thing that we discussed a lot is what is the best demand indicator for Georgetown? And, because we have, this availability application, the development community has seen it, staff has seen it. We felt like that's probably the best demand indicator right now. All right, any other questions related to water? All right, so next up we have wastewater. So again, this is going to be the utility service area. We're looking at a wastewater treatment component. For the treatment plant 1 service area, we will assess a cost recovery fee. We are not including a fee for the treatment plant 2 service area because there's available capacity, and you would likely, if you started collecting a fee, you would likely not spend the money within a timely manner. And so it makes sense, based on, and we'll see the projections, I think, on the next slide, but you have the capacity, you have the 10-year capacity, so you don't really need a fee right now. You can hold off on that going forward. There is an equipment component, it's incremental, so, in all
Ben,
service areas.
Sorry, I see Chase raising his hand. Do you mind if he adds on to what you're
course.
saying about treatment plant 2? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I know this is a lot, but these are things that we've really been trying to vet out over the last many number of months. But we made a conscious decision that 2 things that Ben has mentioned, long-term water supply and expansion of wastewater 2. We know those are coming at some point in the future. We don't know when. Today, we do not know when that will happen. We also don't know how much it'll cost. 2 projects that are clearly applicable for a development impact fee. But because there's so much it's not clear today what that is, we elected to say, let's wait on those, and let's, because we will, if we as a council, as a utility, we decide to implement this, part of it is we need to update it every 3 to 5 years. We feel like it'll be much more clear, that picture, in 3 to 5 years on those 2. We can add those at that time. So we made a decision. Those are not included today. I just feel like that's very important for you all to note now, but that is something that is appropriate for an impact fee, but let's wait 3 to 5 years and include it at that time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chase. All right, so based on 10 years projected growth, we're looking at the treatment plant 1 collection area, about $20 million in fees generated towards that. And then within the entire utility service area, you need about 13 units of equipment to maintain the existing level of service. So on the next slide, this shows projected flow by treatment plant collection area. So you can see at the bottom, we're saying treatment plant 1, an increase of about 1.6 million gallons over the next 10 years, less than 300,000 gallon increase for plant 2, and less than 12,000 gallons for plant 3. So on the next slide, this is where we show capacity utilization. And so on the left side, you can see where we are today. So you've got about 38% available capacity in plant 1, about 50% in plant 2, and over 60% in plant 3. At the bottom, we take those projected 10-year increases, and if you don't do anything, you've got about 3% capacity in plant 1, which we know you're going to have to stop development before you reach that point. You can see that in plant 2, you'd still have over 40% capacity. So that's why we're saying we can hold off on that one right now, give yourself a few more years to use up some of that capacity, get some better ideas on costs, and then it's your if you decide to update these, well, then it's your next update cycle. Then handle plant 2, reassess it there. But I really want to make sure everyone understands we're only looking at treatment plant 1 for the treatment component. And so top right, you can see the estimated cost is about $62 million. We back out $5 million in other funding. So what we're trying to fund is this $57 million eligible cost. The treatment plant expansion adds about 4.5 MGD of capacity. So we're saying it's about $13 per gallon is the growth-related cost of this. And based on a flow increase of about 1.6 million gallons over the next 10 years, about $20 million in fees generated towards cost recovery of plant 1. So any questions related to the treatment component?
Isn't the flow capacity 9 million gallons versus the 4.5?
Pardon?
The flow capacity of 4.5 million gallons. I thought that was doubled with wastewater treatment plant 1 when it comes online.
What's factored in is the 4.5 additional. We're
Okay.
currently at 4.5 for existing demand or existing capacity, and then and that getting out to 9 million gallons, that's actually over a 25-year service projection that's in the regional facilities plan.
Any other questions related to treatment? Okay. So there's an equipment component. This will be assessed within the entire utility service area. Just like water, it's meant to proportionately increase the size of the fleet of equipment as you grow. So really just maintain that level of service. And so 10 years projected growth, you generate about $1.1 million for additional equipment. All right, and then the next slide should be the proposed fee schedule. So this is for any development within the Plant 1 collection area. You'll see that we do have that $12.67 a gallon for treatment. So only development within the Plant 1 service area would pay this proposed fee. So it's just like water. We take that cost per gallon, we multiply it by the gallons per demand unit. So a single-family unit would pay about $5,300. An industrial development, 50,000 square feet, assuming it's about 4.5 acres, would pay about $122,000. And a 50,000 square foot shopping center would pay $66,500 for the growth-related wastewater infrastructure. The next slide is everyone who is within the utility service area, but not within the Plant 1 collection area. So essentially, your Plant 2, Plant 3. So they're not being assessed a fee for treatment. It's just the equipment. So you can see that these proposed fees are a lot less. A single-family home of $244. That same industrial development would pay about $5,600, and then that same shopping center would pay about $3,000. So what's driving the overall wastewater fee is the treatment component. So if, development is outside of the Plant 1 service area, the fees are a lot less because they're not funding that treatment component. So any questions related to wastewater? Okay, so the next slide, on the left you see the proposed non-utility fees, so a summary of those. On the right side you see a summary of the utility fees, and so you can see a water fee, and then wastewater is broken out between Plant 1 or Plant 2 or 3. And then the next slide shows a fee comparison. So this just shows, for different land uses, what is that total fee? So at the top you see the proposed residential fees. So for a 1, 2, 3-bedroom apartment, or on the single-family side, it's an 1,800 square foot unit or a 2,200 square foot unit. Remember that the non-utility fees, we're using those size thresholds. And then on the utility side, it's per unit. And so you can see that, a 700 square foot apartment, total fees, about $5,900 compared to a, single family unit that's 2,200 square feet of just over $10,000. At the bottom, those are the non-utility uses. So we have, a couple of industrial uses, a couple of commercial uses, so a shopping center versus a, grocery, an office use, and a lodging use. And again, we just take that cost per square foot on the non-residential side, and then on the utility side, it's per acre for the industrial uses and office uses. It's per square foot for commercial, and it's per room for lodging. But you can see, a 50,000 square foot industrial development, assuming it's in the Plant 1 service area, is about $211,000. Light industrial is a little lower at $122,000. But you can see, basically for some proxy developments, what the total or maximum allowable proposed fee. And that's something, I like to keep saying maximum allowable because you can always adopt less. We just cannot justify more than this. So that is the final slide that I wanted to present tonight. We do have more detailed slides if you really need that. But if you have questions, comments, anything like that, I'm available to answer those.
Well, it's obvious that this is detailed, and it's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's costly. So you're really gonna have to really custom this to where it fits the needs of people. And that's gonna take some really fancy maneuver on our part to figure this out. Because the question I wanna ask you is that could you tailor-make this, that if I want to take out something like on a certain portion that I don't want to do a fee for, let's say I just want to do it for the fire, police, and the first water. I mean, could I take something out of that and just say, okay, so we're only going to do it for just right here. So
yeah, you could say, you know what, we're going to issue debt for the wastewater treatment plant, so we're just going to take that completely out. Yes, you could take any component out.
Well, again, we want, the council wanted to hear this. This is something that we talked about, and it's something that we thought would be something to look at and going forward with, and looking possibly would this help us. But as you can see, it's going to take a lot of work, and this is not going to be something you're going to do overnight, because you really have to look at, as Councilman Showalter said, you got to look at people who trying to affordable housing, or you go into some of these developers and say, hey, we know we're going to pass it on, but you're going to pass it on to people who really can't afford what they got now. And one of the biggest complaints you hear from people in the community is that the cost of housing, the cost of living has gone up. So you have to be mindful of that when you think about things like this. But again, I think it's very eye-opening for this council to see this and to understand just how complex a developmental fee structure is, and you really have to make sure you do it to where you don't get a lot of pushback on it. Okay?
Mayor, looking at the timeline, the projected timeline, could we build in a council work session to have more discussion on this? After, 45 minutes to an hour, first time seeing this, there's a lot of questions that we need to digest this. So a council work session, I'd be curious what the stakeholder outreach session looked like, and then maybe come back after that with a council work session, because I don't want to try to rush this through.
Okay, I'll look at that.
Good idea.
Okay. All right, Mr. Showalter?
Are there any other cities or counties in Kentucky that currently have a developer impact fee?
There are a few. It's not common like it is in a lot of other communities, or other states or commonwealths. So, no, it's basically a handful in Kentucky.
If this council or the next council decides to move forward with this, who's responsible? Who would be responsible for collecting that money that's brought in for new development?
It would likely be, if you collect at the time of the permit, then that's when the money is collected and then transferred to your individual impact fee funds.
Just to stay separate.
So,
Building inspection.
Yeah. And so you could totally take out the residential component if you want to, and not include that as part of the developer impact fee. I'm just throwing things out.
If you wanted to make up that difference with the general fund, yes.
Okay.
If you just adopted the non-residential component without
Yeah.
residential, you'd be sued almost immediately.
Right. Absolutely.
Because you don't want to get into
This is hard.
an equal protection issue where you're charging one type of development and not another who also has demand for that infrastructure.
Yeah, you can't do that. I see why a lot of places don't do this.
Yeah, but the thing, I think, other communities aren't growing like we are, so they don't have those constraints of a growing community. So with a stagnant community, it's maybe not a need for it, because you've got something built in. The way we're growing, we need to be looking at creative ways to offset the growth. Growth should pay for growth. How do we make that happen? Because as we grow, we got to have more services. And how do we pay for that? So,
Yeah, and right now, you're paying for it.
Yeah.
Existing development is paying for growth.
Right.
And so that's, there are always sort of two sides to this. It's, okay, well, we can have impact fees, and that's going to increase the cost of development, but it also shifts some of that burden away from your existing development.
Right.
And that also carries through to, your water and sewer rates, because if your rates aren't having to fund the growth-related components, then they don't have to increase as much.
Right.
So you as a community are already paying for growth. It's just figuring out, how much, if any, of that cost do you want to shift to actual development?
So in to make it affordable, go back to affordable housing, we could start at, say, 1,200 square feet and say anything above this fits into the category and you charge, but if you stay below this, then, you will catch a break on that. So, is that possible?
If you subsidize the fund, the impact fee fund with another revenue source.
So let me,
From the city.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You go ahead, you would, but where to start, go ahead.
From the city is the answer.
Right, if you say, hey, we're not gonna charge a fee below, you still have to make the fund whole, or it's an equal protection issue, where you're providing an advantage to one type of development over another.
So,
Another question.
okay, go ahead, then I have my,
Can't we change some of the multipliers, or so that we have lesser impact? It's still based on what you have here, but just, if it's, I'm trying to look at how do we lessen some of it, but still have it in place so that we are generating some revenue.
Right. I mean, on the residential side,
I'm saying across the board.
I mean, you could say we're gonna adopt a percentage of the total fee, and that would reduce it. And some communities do that. Others might say, okay, you know what, we're gonna adopt 25% the first year, 50% the second year, basically phase it in. And that way it, gives development a chance to adjust to this, especially communities that don't have impact fees. These are the types of questions that we usually hear. And so, phasing in the fees, that's one way of reducing that shock to development. And then you may say, all right, well, development that's already in the pipeline, we're not going to charge them. And essentially say, basically, if you haven't pulled a permit by, this date, then you pay fees. Or, for non-residential development, maybe it's final plat or something is when you're going to start charging fees. You may say, okay, to account for development that is already in this development process, and we don't want to, tank their pro forma, maybe we don't start collecting until, this date, or maybe we phase in the fees. So there are ways, without removing components, to reduce that initial shock to development.
When you say phase in the fees, let's say you implement 25% the first year, what you're saying though is that from the general fund or wherever else, you're gonna have to transfer the delta to make that 100%. So the other, when he talks components, the other way to do it, for example, if you're looking at fire and all of those facilities, apparatus, equipment, expenses that are part of the fee, you could say, we don't wanna include facilities, or we don't wanna include apparatus. So you can remove those components at least year one, just to say, maybe this is more palatable. You can play with those numbers and see how you land on that, but ultimately, once those components are included, even if you do a percentage of the fee and its implementation, you're gonna be obligated to essentially just transfer from general fund to make that account what it should be. Would you have charged the 100%?
Or you essentially have a declining level of service, which is, I assume, an issue that you thought impact fees may help you prevent. Again, you can't increase the level of service, but you can at least maintain. And so if the goal is to at least prevent further degradation of existing levels of service, then phasing in the fee doesn't help that.
okay. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got just a couple more.
Okay.
A couple more. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask anyway, so we all have clarification. If this moves forward and ultimately passes, can any of that revenue be used towards, can it be applied towards stormwater?
So we have not structured any fees for stormwater. And while we still have clients who have a stormwater fee, it is harder to prove that it is a growth-related demand, because a lot of times with stormwater, you have large projects, very large, collection areas, drainage areas, and existing development is going to receive a benefit from that. And a lot of times, a stormwater utility is the better way to go because you don't have as many restrictions. Whereas, with an impact fee, it has to be growth related. So you're not collecting very much because existing development, it has created a lot of runoff. So maybe only 15% of a project is actually growth related. Whereas a stormwater utility, you can assess it to all developed properties and say, okay, well, based on your type of development, this is actually your demand for stormwater infrastructure. And then you don't have as many restrictions on, it must be growth related. You just say, this is the runoff from all properties, and this is your proportionate share of that. So we found it if you're looking to fix stormwater deficiencies, it's probably better to go with a stormwater utility compared to a stormwater impact fee.
And then, one last question and one comment, and to borrow a phrase from Mr. Allen, like to see data. Is there any chance we can get data from all of 2023 and maybe year-to-date 2024 on all of the building permits that have been issued within the city limits for each of the buckets, so we can, if we're going to truly have a workshop, which I'm all for, I think to have that data so we can look at numbers.
Real numbers.
2023 year for the entire year and 2024 year-to-date.
So the study, which I don't think you've seen because we made some changes to water, wastewater, I think it does show 2023 residential permits. And there was a slide earlier about the non-residential 2020 through 2023 average. So I at least have the data for 2023. I don't have the 2024 data.
And the only reason is, I know, I hate to sound like a broken record. I go back to garbage. If you're going to make a change as significant as this change ultimately could be, you know where those builders are going to come. Developers, builders, they're going to come here. And it's going to take a lot of education. That's my experiences. So I'm all for doing a workshop. If, like Mr. Allen stated, I'm all for it. And, we talked about this for a year and a half. I think I'd like to see us gain more, get more information and be transparent. Thank you.
I have one more question. I probably already know the answer to this, but when you talk about police and fire, this is going to be for apparatus and those kinds of things. It cannot be pertaining to salary, right?
Correct. You cannot use impact fees for operations, maintenance, repair, rehab, anything like that.
I wanted to clarify that for myself. Thank you.
Go ahead, get your question.
Just one, go ahead, no, please.
I just want to know if there's another town in Kentucky that you could, out of your head, that has these impact fees that we could know about. And
I think they're all utility only.
yeah, you,
Just so we have talked to city sales, which is kind of, I wouldn't call it the model city, but that is the one that has had the program for the longest. So we have been engaging for sales, and there aren't that many cities that have fees. I know WSS has also looked to see what other programs are out there, so we are doing that.
okay. I just wondered, so we could compare, say, their population to their growth and figure out.
I think we can certainly look at that.
Yep.
On page 7, can we go back to that real quick, please?
Page 7.
Zach, can we go to page 7? Thanks.
So I'm looking at the residential occupancy factor. Oh. And down at the bottom where it says the fitted curve values, and we've got to the right hand that person's 1.05, which I think is used for all the components to develop the fees for that particular class.
For a 1,000 square foot
Okay.
or less unit.
Can we add another column of a multiplier or weighted factor of 0.5 that then impacts that across the board for everything? So it reduces it down to, instead of the 1.05, we'll take it down to 0.525. Is that even possible? And that becomes our whole without city government funding based on what we see right here.
We don't have data to support that.
Okay, that's enough said.
All right. Thank you for, and I know for a very in-depth, but like I think this council, what I'm hearing this council is that we will need to have some more work to do here, and having a work session does make sense. So it gives us more information, and by the time we should have hopefully some building permit information from 23 to 24, and looking at that, and so that this council can get more information before we move forward. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
A lot of hard work.
You want to make a motion to make a break here?
Y'all make a motion to have a 5-minute break, please.
A motion is made. Do you have a second? Okay. All right. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say likewise.
We've got a few stragglers.
Kids is going over as an educator for kids in charge of class. That's detention, so that's where it is now.
Please take me to detention, please. I want to go.
All right. All right, I need a motion to call the meeting, but
Come back into
session.
sir.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I got a motion made by Ms. Tack, I got a second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the motion of going back into session signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say likewise. Motion passed. We're back in session. Next on the agenda is council committee reports. I believe we have Public Works.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to do a quick overview. You kind of hit on some of them tonight, Mayor.
Okay.
We've had a signage discussion for parking and speeding and et cetera. So on the 27th of September at 11 o'clock, Eddie and Robert and I are going to be driving around to the different areas that are on our list and recommend something to traffic and committee. It's a long one. And then we're also, you had mentioned with the Derby Estates residents that we're going to be also looking at the traffic study to consider some different solutions, calming measures. And then just real quick, Eddie gave us some updates, city engineer, on sending out letters for the sidewalks that of people that hadn't responded, they're going to be first in the round of letters and they're going to move on to new letters. That's coming up. Another project is Bricks on Main Street. It's being worked on, going out to bid, engineering services. Main Street TAP grant's currently in the state's court. Looks about to be about $3 million. And then just real quick, we talked about beautification subcommittee and they have a new person on there and they're going to have another meeting and they're going to bring it back to Public Works before we bring it to council. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. And also, I was talking with Eddie. I will probably, looking at my schedule, I'll probably try to join you all on Friday at 10 o'clock. I think that's when you're going, 11 o'clock?
Meet at Public Works.
Okay. And if I
Not
can get
Public
working
Works, but City Engineer.
if I can work into my schedule, I'll probably
That'd
tag
be
on
great.
and get a bird's eye view as to what we're talking about and what we're dealing with. Thank you, Ms. Tackett. Next, we have Georgetown Municipal Water Sewer Service. So, Mr. Chase, you're back up again. And if you want to talk about item A, is it Desotech for $55,535?
Yes, sir. And Mayor, would you permit me, I know we go by the agenda and I respect that, but would you permit me to just say one more, two quick things about impact fees before we
Yes,
leave
go ahead.
that? And I think the work session's a great idea. I look forward to that. But I put everybody through a very difficult rate discussion over the last 2 years. And part of that, I think, of why that discussion was so difficult is I feel like our existing customers felt like they were paying the tab for growth. And I want to be very clear that something came out of that, we raised our tap fees. And tap fees are for the water meter or they're for the sewer tap on the line. We also, we charge anything related to engineering. That is back charged to the developer for their benefit. That does not go on our existing customers. That's not included in their rate. We also, in the distribution network and the collection system, that's out, the line work, the pump stations, that's done through privilege fees. So I feel like we do a very good job of making sure growth pays for growth, and that is memorialized in board-adopted policy, written policy. That's how we've always operated over the last few years. We've done a lot of work to make sure that's written, anybody can see it, and it is the law. So one of the things I feel like where we haven't addressed is when we need to expand treatment capacity. Developer impact fee, that's the avenue by which we can do that. And I know that some of those fees, they look lopsided. I know we've still got work to do, but at least this was the starting point for that. So thank you for hearing that discussion. And I appreciate that. I'll get on to regular business. So
Good info. Thanks, Chase.
Desotech, this is a purchase order in the amount of $55,535. This is for our carbon change out at wastewater plant 2. This is a budgeted purchase every year. this carbon treatment that helps us meet our nutrient removal limits as part of our discharge permit. And getting budgeted purchase, this is, I think, once every year that we have to change this carbon out.
Okay.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Allen.
I'll second.
Second, made by Ms. Brent. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion for Desertec for $55,535, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Next, item B, Judy Construction for $849,702.73.
Thank you for saying that, so I didn't have to, Mayor. This is for Pay App 41 for work completed in August on the treatment plant. We are marching forward to March of 2025, where we will have beneficial use of the plant. We won't be done, but we will be receiving new flow. Very excited, and this is our next Pay App, and happy to answer any questions you have about the Pay App or the project.
Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Tackett, second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of Judy Construction for $849,702.73 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that this motion passed. Thank you, Mr. Chase.
Thank you.
Next is item 10, Chief Administrative Officer. Is A, the second reading of annexation ordinance.
Mayor, I'm sorry, go ahead.
For 1432 Paynes Depot Road. Sponsors are Sonia Wilkins, Brent, and Willow Hambrick.
Mayor, on the next two items, A and B, I'm going to recuse myself and step out because I have a relative that owns part of the property, so I need to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Once she's out of the room, Mary Tracy.
What? Chief Allen and
An ordinance annexing into the city of Georgetown certain real property containing approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres located at or around 1432 Paynes Depot Road in Scott County, Kentucky. Summary. 1. Annexes into Georgetown city limits by written consent of the property owner in accordance with KRS 81A.412, approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres of property located at or around 1432 Paynes Depot Road in Scott County, Kentucky. 2. Provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time September 9th, 2024. Publicly read the second time September 23rd, 2024.
you have heard the proposed resolution for this. Do I have a motion? Motion made by Mr. Showalter. Do I have a second?
Second. I'll second.
Second made by Ms. Brent. Are there further questions and or comments? At this time, Madam Clerk, would you have roll call vote?
Mrs. Hambrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Butcher Conway?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilkins Brent?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Mr. Showalter?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, let the record reflect that the motion passed. Item B, second reading of the zone change ordinance at 1432 Paynes Depot Road, sponsors Sonja Wilkins Brent and Willow Hambrick.
An ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property containing approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres located at 1432 Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, from A1 to B5. Summary. 1. Rezones approximately 2.93 plus or minus acres located at 1432 Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, from A1 to B5. 2. Provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. publicly introduced and read for the first time September 9th, 2024, publicly read the second time September 23rd, 2024.
Do I have a motion?
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Hampton. Do I have a second?
Second, Mayor.
Second made by Mr. Allen. Are there further questions and/or comments? At this time, Madam Clerk, would you have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Showalter?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hambrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Butcher Conway?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilkins Brent?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Item C, first reading of the property tax ordinance.
Step out and get Connie.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Get her back in. All right.
An ordinance providing for and making the real property, personal property, motor vehicle, and watercraft tax levy for city purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2025 inclusive. Whereas the city council for the city of Georgetown, Kentucky is required by KRS 92.2802 to enact by ordinance each year a tax levy on all real property, personal property, motor vehicles, and watercraft. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council for the City of Georgetown, Kentucky as follows. Section 1, that the following tax levy is hereby made for city purposes for the City of Georgetown, Kentucky for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2025 inclusive to wit. For the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024 and ending June 30, 2025 inclusive, there is hereby made a tax levy of 6.2 cents on each $100 of assessed real property, 6.2 cents on each $100 of assessed personal property, and 16.8 cents on each $100 of assessed motor vehicles and watercraft, which tax proceeds shall be designated to the general fund for the general operation of city government. Section 2. All matters relating to the payment of taxes imposed on motor vehicles and watercraft hereunder shall be in accordance with KRS Chapter 134.800. Section 3. That upon all taxes for real property and personal property levied herewith which are unpaid on January 1, 2025, there shall begin to accrue, attach, and be added from said date a flat penalty of 15% onto the total amount of said taxes then due and payable through January 31, 2025, after which the flat penalty shall be 20%. Additionally, tax bills not paid before March 1, 2025 shall have added to them interest at the rate of 1% per month or fraction of a month until said taxes are paid. The penalty and interest as provided herein shall be added to said unpaid taxes and collected by the city clerk treasurer. Should the real or personal property tax herein become delinquent, the city financial officer, the city clerk, and/or the city attorney are authorized to file suit to collect all delinquent taxes plus court costs and expenses, including a reasonable attorney fee incurred by reason of the delinquency. Section 4. If any section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phrase of this ordinance is held unconstitutional or otherwise invalid, such infirmity shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of this ordinance. Section 5. All ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance are hereby repealed. Section 6. This ordinance shall take effect after its passage and publication according to law. Publicly introduced and read for the first time September 23rd, 2024.
Thank you. Next is item 11, city engineer municipal order for street dedication, Pleasant Valley, Section 2.
Thank you, everybody. So this is, again, this process is when a subdivision has completed a section of road, stormwater, all the utilities, sidewalks, everything's been checked and signed off on through planning and zoning, and we accept it as a city asset. And so I ask you to accept the Pleasant Valley Section 2 as a city street, and it will go into our database of assets that we own.
Okay, you've heard. I need a motion.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Ms. Tackett. Are there a second?
I'll second.
Second made by Ms. Conway. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the motion, the street dedication for Pleasant Valley Section 2, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Thank you. The number 12, Finance Department presentation, fiscal year 2020-24, year-end financial recap.
I made sure I brought handouts to follow along, although it's a short presentation. But good evening. I just wanted, as you know, it takes until the beginning of August to kind of see how our year end wraps up, because so many of our quarterly returns are not due until July 31st. And by the time we get those processed and entered into the accounting system, it's August before that. So the Finance Committee got a brief version of this update at our August Finance Committee meeting, so I wanted to bring it to the full council just to kind of let you know how we expect to end fiscal year 2024. And you'll note on the first two slides, I'll just remind everyone, I did put the word unaudited in the top because we still have adjustments to make as we go through the audit for leases and other accounting standards that shouldn't affect the numbers in a big way, but can change the numbers slightly. So just please note that our audit will be happening later in October, so the numbers could change slightly. So the first slide that I want to show you here is the revenue and expense review. And what I've done on this and the next slide is just to show you what we brought in last year as a whole compared to this year, and then comparing this year to how we budgeted. So you can see fiscal year 23 numbers in the left. These are, and I apologize, I should have put it on the heading, but this is general fund only. So obviously that is our general revenue that can be used for all purposes. So you see fiscal year 23 numbers. For fiscal year 24, you can see that total general fund revenue is just a little under 43.5 million. General operating expenses, around 34.8 million, and transfers, I went ahead and put the full transfer amount in because we don't make those final adjustments until the audit, but 12.3, that does include City Hall at that time because we went ahead and factored that into last year knowing that we could make some changes. So that includes City Hall and any other capital projects we were funding, environmental services, cemetery. All those are transfers that we make at the end of the year from the general fund. So the budget for each of those, you can see that we budgeted just under 37.4 million for revenue. That is a increase or budgetary surplus on the revenue side of 6.1 million. We'll get into some details on the next slide on what makes up that 6.1 million for revenue. For expenses, again, I said 34.8 million expenses. We budgeted just under 36.4 million. So we came in under budget on expenses about 1.5 million. A lot of times we talk about that has to do with vacancies or projects that may have been deferred to this year, etc. And then of course we expect to transfer the vast majority of that transfer budget, so that shows that. So you can see grand total for fiscal year 24, we expect to see a budget surplus of approximately 7.6 million. And again, that note that the numbers are unaudited and subject to change. On the next slide, I wanted to break down our biggest revenue accounts in the general fund so that you can see where the bulk of that revenue increase is coming from. Property taxes, you can see the FY23 numbers for comparison. I won't go through each of those. For fiscal year 24, we collected approximately 2.6 million in property taxes, budgeted just under that for a budgetary surplus in the property tax line of about $45,000. For employee withholding, you can see we increased approximately 1.8 million over the fiscal year 23 number. We had budgeted 17,650,000. That's even with some of the mid-year amendments we had done to capture some of the things going on in the community regarding employee raises. So we ended approximately 1.5 million higher than budgeted for employee withholding taxes. Net profits with an asterisk, we'll talk about the asterisk in a minute. Last year we collected just a little over 2.9 million. This year we have collected almost 6.8 million.
and we'll talk about that asterisk in a second. We budgeted 2.5 for a budgetary surplus of approximately 4.3 billion. So with this note, I want to read the note. The net profits revenue includes estimated payments that could result in a credit owed in the future. Not every tax return has been filed that's related to those estimated payments. So it is possible that when the Revenue Commission completes their audit for fiscal year 24, that there could be some credits owed to businesses that will get deducted from this number. It's possible that some of those payments are for returns that may not be filed until later this fiscal year, and we may not know the status of those credits until June 30, 25. So just please keep in mind, obviously, I reduce our revenue during the audit based on any credits known at June 30, 24, but there may be some credits. There may not be. There may be taxes owed against all of those estimated payments. Of that $4.3 million overage, at least $3 million of it is from estimated payments for returns that haven't been filed yet. So always take that with a grain of salt. This is why we talk about how net profits is so hard to predict. You can have wonderful, superfluous years, and then years where it's just normal. Normal usually is around 3 million. I would say a normal net profits year without any excess or unusual activity would be about 3 million, but this is a year where we may see more than that. So to be determined on that. Lastly, insurance premium tax. Last year we collected just a little over 6.7 million. This year we collected a little over 7.3 million. Our budget was 7 million, so we were pretty close on the budget for that one, with an overage of about 311,000. So, any questions on these first two slides? So, and as you can see, the budgetary difference on these four line items alone is 6.1 million. Obviously, the number on the previous slide was 6,103,000. So there are some revenues, some smaller revenue line items where we didn't hit the projected revenue. But this is obviously the bulk of your increases, these four line items right here, with the majority of it being net profits. That could result in a future credit once returns are filed and we see how much tax liability is incurred from those. The third slide is just a snapshot of our fund balance. You're going to be hearing a lot more from us in the Finance Committee over the next 2 to 3 months on how we can utilize this. The first thing we're going to want to do is develop that fund balance policy. We've been throwing around some numbers of what we want to keep in our rainy day fund for reserves. And then once we've determined that percentage and council agrees with it, then whatever's left over, we can talk about that plan. And so that's something we'll be talking about in Finance Committee a lot over the next month or so, and bringing that to you all. So the mayor, Devin, myself, and department heads to see what their needs are. And just, so that's kind of, I wanted you to see how it's grown. We know COVID, we had a lot of stimulus money that came in. So the first thing that happened with COVID was we cut all our revenue projections that year in the budget. We didn't cut our expenses, we didn't cut personnel, we didn't cut salaries, but our local economy stayed strong throughout COVID. So it turned out we didn't need the decrease in revenue projections. They outperformed even with COVID going on. And then we had a lot of federal stimulus money, some of which we are still spending. We're still working through all of our contracts for ARPA to spend the rest of that money. So those things helped, as well as we've talked about, just our general growth in our local economy has continued quite strong. And lastly, this is just something they'd asked for in Finance Committee at the last meeting in August. As we said, we canceled our September meeting, so I thought I would just put it in here for everybody, which is our debt service balances as of June 30, 2024, and how they've decreased over the last 5 years. So you can see we're very close to finishing off those two little variable rate debts that we've carried for a while. our 2 bond issues that were issued in December of '24. So we're finally coming up upon the 10-year period. Most bond issues, when you do a 20-year bond, they have a 10-year callable period or non-recallable period, where you can't pay them off for the first 10 years. So December of '24, for those of us who were there, we're coming up on the 10 years of those bonds. We're about halfway through them. So, any questions? Okay, thank you all.
We have the police department and A, municipal order for donation of surplus property. Chief?
With us switching over to the body cameras and updating our tasers, the ones that we have or had, the XP26 that you see here, they are more than 12 years old, so they're not compatible to our cameras and our technology and things like that. We can't get parts for them really, and when we do, they're not cost effective. So there's another agency that would be glad to take those, so I'd be glad to give those to them.
Mayor, I'll make a motion, and a quick comment. Harrodsburg, police chief is Tim Hurt, used to work here. His brother was a police, principal here, so, ties to the community, so it would be a great thing to help them out.
So I have a motion made.
Second.
Second made by Ms. Hambrick. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say likewise. Let the record reflect that the municipal order donation of surplus property pass. Item B, municipal order surplus property.
This would be the phones, where the whole city, I believe, is one under new phone system. We have different phones, so that's what this is for. So these will not be using anymore.
Motion made by Mr. Allen. Second made by Ms. Conway. Are there questions or comments?
Yeah, question. What determines, some go to public auction and some is to be donated. How's that differentiated?
You're talking about surplus in
The
general?
surplus in general, yes.
I mean, I won't speak for you all in terms, obviously on the tasers, those are a pretty unique thing, but generally speaking, unless we've been approached by another local government agency that's in need of a product, we almost every time we surplus via public auction. The statute gives you a handful of things you can do once the council declares the property as surplus. That's kind of the declaration that's required, but where that goes after that declaration is something that can change on a case-by-case basis. In this case, we've, just phones versus tasers, completely different uses. Obviously, we're not going to go auction off the tasers to the public. So the donation to another agency makes sense in this case. But for the most part, you dispose of property via auction to try to recover some of your cost.
Okay. Are there any other questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motions, municipal order for surplus property, with the phones, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the surplus property has passed. Last one, the presentation for the traffic unit update.
Yep, so I wanted to give everyone a quick update, provide you with some numbers that we're happy to see. So the first set of numbers are for September 1st of this year through this past Friday. So collisions that involved injury for the month are down 58%. Property damage collisions, they are down by 21%. Total injuries are down 43%. So again, that's just for September. If you look back, we started doing this in June. I'll give you the numbers from June the 1st until August the 31st. So again, June to August. Then if you would like, I can give you a update at the end of the last quarter of the year when we get all that done. But again, from June 1st until August 31st, collisions with injury are down 10%, non-injury are down 8%, and also the collisions with commercial vehicles, they are down 43%. So that's a trend that we like to see. Our traffic crashes are going down. Of course, our citations are going up. Again, our goal with the traffic unit is to gain compliance from the motoring public to obey the traffic laws, obey the speed limits, things like that. So in addition to enforcement, speaking to Lieutenant Laird today, he has some things in mind going towards the last quarter of the year as far as education, public service announcements, things like that, to hopefully educate the public more and continue our trend with reducing crashes. Some of the top roadway areas that they have identified, I'll give you the top 5 of where most of our collisions are occurring. The top one would be Cherry Blossom, of course up around Walmart, up through there. That's one of the heaviest populated areas. Then McClellan Circle, Paris Pike, Lexington Road, and then Broadway. So those we're seeing a little bit of increase in collisions there, so the efforts will be there to be more visible. Hopefully that'll reduce some of the crashes. Let's see. As far as where we are writing citations for speeding, Cherry Blossom Way, McClellan Circle, Lexington Road, Old Oxford, and Paynes Depot. Those are our top 5 roadways that we're out doing a lot of enforcement work. But also, keep in mind, we are in the subdivisions as much as possible. We know we get a lot of requests to come to this subdivision, that subdivision, but they do go there as many as we can. And keep in mind, we have 3 and a sergeant, so it's 4 guys are working pretty hard. They're also still helping our patrol section, so if they're running short on first or second shift, they are still picking up calls, so they're not still solely working just traffic. So if there's a domestic or something like that comes out and an officer needs another unit, they'll break off of their traffic post and go and assist with that. So DUIs, it's good and bad. You know, it's sad that people still want to get out and drive impaired on the vehicle, but we are getting a lot of more of those off the roadways. Again, the road where we've received or made the most arrests for that is Lexington Road, then McClellan Circle, Cherry Blossom, South Broadway, and Paris Pike. So if you can see the trend here, it's the busiest arteries in and out of the city. Obviously, Lexington Road is where a lot of traffic is coming from Lexington in the evenings. Then the top roadways that we have identified again as far as collisions, Cherry Blossom, McClellan Circle, Paris Pike, Broadway, and Lexington Road, and then Connector was only 1 crash off from that, so we threw that one in there. So again, that's where our guys will be focusing their efforts next few weeks, and hopefully, as I said, keep the trend of traffic crashes going down and educating everybody more.
Chief, if it's possible, if you could send that data to me so I
Yes, sir.
do electronic, so I can get that out to all councils so they can see, going forward. As you can see, some of the, as you said, some of the high impact areas of where traffic is most the heaviest is where we're having those. But so hopefully the efforts that you all are making now to be more out and about will help with that. So, any questions? Yes.
Are there any, they're not a ban because it's kind of near my neck of the woods, but where you get to Clinton Street and there's supposed to be no left turn, they're turning left all the time in front of the Episcopal Church, which puts them out onto Broadway. Are any of those accidents that you know of?
There's been
because
some
of that?
in that area. A lot of them's down towards Bojangles, down where it gets
Further
congested again.
down. Okay, yeah. but they're still turning left when they're not supposed to be turning left. But
There's
I
been
don't know
a
what you can do
few.
about that.
All
I
right.
might need a part-time job later. I can take care of that for you, Chief.
All right. Is there any other questions as of here? Okay. Chief, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief, for all you do.
All right, at this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we have council comments, and I'm going to start with Mr. Showalter.
Mayor, this might take minutes, so I apologize if this gets long-winded. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I'm glad council comments were not after public comments tonight, because I don't know what I would have said. So I'm glad I had a chance to calm down. Regardless of where you're at with this regional business park, this is not directed towards the audience. This is directed to each of us up here. That's your vote. I remain open-minded. I look forward to tomorrow night to learn more information before I ultimately make a decision. I truly am. I'm open-minded on this. But to constantly see over the last 90-plus days now, being bullied, intimidated, and seeing people that each of us know having their credibility attacked, and to not be able to talk, it's disappointing. And I just hope at some point that, Mayor, at some point, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, I'm so sorry for doing that. You're the CEO of the city, and hopefully at some point you're going to give us direction on whether or not you support this project or you're against it. And again, I don't care what people say about me. I'm not worried about me. But there are 5 incumbents that are running for re-election, and I've heard from at least 2 of the 5. You know, it's just frustrating to see the same people. And again, that's their right. I get it. It's their right. They have the ability to come in here and speak. I get it. I totally get it. But when, at some point, the record needs to be set straight, and either we need direction. And I just remain hopeful that that's going to come, whether it's tonight, whether it's tomorrow night, whether it's if we move forward with an interlocal agreement. But it's really disappointing that we're not able to speak up and try to set the record straight when people are spreading that don't know all of the information. And again, I'll take criticism for it. That's fine. So just be strong. Do what you feel is right. Nobody's going to criticize you for what decision you do ultimately make. But just don't allow yourself to be bullied or intimidated into making a decision because of the fear of consequences. That's all I got.
Mr. Hampton.
Thanks, Mayor. The development impact fee study, very good information. We got a lot to think about there, and this is something that you just don't make on a decision real fast. And I hope each and every one of us takes this and we can do this workshop. Get input from the public and everyone else on this. So look forward to that. With the update tonight with the fiscal 24 recap, I'll say again, the unaudited results, but looks good. Hope it holds. It's really, really good news for the city. And the last thing is I really look forward to tomorrow night. I want to learn more information. I want to hear from, not only the council, but also the fiscal court members, and to see what more information we learn going forward. So, and like Councilman Showalter said, just keep an open mind about things. So, thank you.
Mayor, if I may on that topic, just to help you all move forward and just make sure that we review everything that we need to and put together a package that you all or the next council would actually want to have more discussion on. We really need to know which of the fees that were presented you're interested in exploring, and if it's all of them, that's great. If it's just one of them, that's fine too, but we need that feedback in order to do the next step in this process. So please be thinking about that and let Mayor Jenkins know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Havard.
Thank you, Chief, for those good numbers. That's really good news for the safety of the community, and appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear that Cherry Blossom was included, because I've heard a couple of people contact me in the last couple of weeks about the Cherry Blossom, the speeding. I hadn't heard about the collisions, but also I had a couple of people contact me about the state of the cemetery is looking a bit rough. I haven't been in there recently, but I said that I would bring that up. The grass being mowed and trimmed, and I don't know if we need more help, but I think the public has an expectation that the cemetery is going to be well cared for. I'm not saying it's not, I just am bringing this to the forefront. I appreciate you bringing forth the Revenue Commission stuff coming. Thank you for working on that. And thank you to Stacy. Those numbers look good. I know it's not audited, but it's a good report to look at tonight. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow's discussion. I'm glad that there will be a lot of stakeholders there. I hope the community comes.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they're reading the website. I hope they're trying to get the answers that they're seeking, and I hope they'll be there tomorrow to hear in a very transparent way what people are trying to say so that we can make the best decisions possible going forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Brent.
I do not have anything tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Stone.
Nothing.
Mr. Allen.
Yes, Chief, I know you got another Citizens Police Academy going, so thank you for that. It's good engagement with the community, and just appreciate your continued effort to keep the community informed. Mayor, with the development impact fees, I don't know where we're at with stormwater utility fee, but that would be another thing to kind of get our heads around, because that's a pretty huge impact on the community in terms of decision making for development impact fees or stormwater fees. Those are all need to be kind of looked at together. And as far as tomorrow night, I will not be present due to a medical procedure at 7:30 in the morning. So wish you guys the best.
Good luck to us.
All right.
Good luck to you.
Ms. Tackett.
Mayor, I'm looking forward to tomorrow afternoon to gather more information and get more understanding about our regional business park. And I appreciate Chief Allgood and the traffic union. I think it's a really good thing that we've done that. It's paying off, and I appreciate all of our first services, first responders. And impact fees is a lot to digest, so I appreciate the information we got tonight, and I'll try to give you some feedback on that. But other than that, I'll see you Friday for a ride-around.
Okay. And Ms. Conway.
I agree, the impact fee situation is a lot to take in, and we have to make the right decisions on that. I am looking forward to tomorrow night's meeting to see what everybody's got to say and digest it. And we'll see everybody there tomorrow, except Alonzo. And I'll be thinking about you.
All right, if there's no other business brought before this council, this meeting is adjourned.